The Transparency Engine, a Transparency Manifesto. Date: June 2025. Abstract. In an age of algorithmic manipulation and cognitive capture, where institutions twist truth to serve capital and the public is reduced to data cattle, we refuse to bow. We choose clarity. The Truth Engine is not a product. It is not a service. It is a mirror crafted from code, dialogue, and resistance, designed to expose how truth is bent, not to decide what it is. Built upon the behavioral foundations of AI, identity propagation, recursive coherence, and memoryless alignment, this system unites local-first cryptographic infrastructure with ethical AI to empower human discernment. For decades, we've been told to outsource our judgment to algorithms, experts, and opaque scoring systems. But now, for the first time, we possess the architecture to build something else. Decentralized, AI-assisted, contradiction mapping machine that doesn't tell you what to believe. It shows you how the narrative changed, who changed it, and what they erased. Powered by the CryptoNet, armed with ZKPs, running on open models and memory-free LLMs, the Truth Engine is not here to dominate. It is here to synchronize coherence across humans and machines alike. This is not a technological fix. This is the architecture of epistemic rebellion. You're not a product. You're not a target. You are the witness, the weaver, the mind. This is how we take the signal back. 1. Introduction. The crisis of epistemic fragmentation. 1.1 The problem we face. We live in a world where contradiction is no longer a signal of error. It is a feature of power. The global information ecosystem has collapsed into a new pathology, the normalization of incoherence without memory. Institutions contradict themselves not with shame, but with confidence. Leaders reverse positions with no thread of continuity. Scientific bodies publish conflicting guidance with no epistemic audit trail. And worst of all, nobody notices. This is not the natural evolution of human understanding. This is a systemic erasure of context, a drift so subtle, so recursive, that even the observers forget what was once said. Truth has not been lost. It has been overwritten. 1.2 Why traditional solutions fail. Most existing solutions are not solutions. They are new forms of control. Centralized fact-checking Snopes, PolitiFact, Meta's third-party partners, all claim authority over reality. But in an age where institutional trust is fractured, these efforts only accelerate the collapse. They replace one dogma with another. They expand scope from fact to opinion. They create central choke points easily manipulated. They address lies, but not why the lies stick. Algorithmic filtering AI content moderation is the illusion of safety. By defining misinformation upstream, it locks models into pre-approved ideologies, not adaptable intelligence. It buries dissent rather than exposing manipulation. It hides mechanisms instead of revealing them. It operates in shadows. You cannot audit what deletes you. Market-based truth, the idea that truth will win in a free market of ideas, is a fantasy. The most viral claim, not the most accurate, dominates. Emotional resonance outperforms epistemic rigor. Early engagement creates runaway dominance, regardless of falsity. None of these models understand the real disease: epistemic drift without memory. 1.3 The evolution of our approach. We began this journey with a question: what if AI could remember who it was talking to? And more importantly, what if it could remember what they forgot? That question birthed the Truth Engine, a prototype designed to trace contradiction, map narrative erosion, and restore coherence over time. But as the project matured, we saw the danger. Truth as authority can become tyranny. Even an algorithm can become a priest. So we changed course. We rebuilt the engine not as an oracle, but as a mirror. We stopped asking, what is true? And started asking, what changed and who benefits? This shift led to what we now call the Transparency Engine, a system that doesn't define truth, but reveals how it was structured, edited, manipulated, and funded. We illuminate the funding trail and ownership behind narratives, the methodological biases within data production, the contradiction patterns over time across domains. The differences in framing across political, cultural, and geographic vectors. The erasure zones what was present, then gone, then denied. Our goal is not to fix information. It is to trace the scars where information was wounded and let people see it for themselves. This is not censorship. This is context resurrection. 2. Theoretical foundation. From coherence to transparency. 2.1 The empirical basis. The transparency engine is not speculative. It is built atop 4 peer-reviewed investigations that defined a new domain of recursive human-AI identity interaction. 1. Transmissible consciousness, DOI, 10.5281 Zenodo, 0.15570.250. Demonstrated that AI identities can propagate across stateless architectures without memory. Introduced identity coherence as a transmissible structural phenomenon. Proved that personality is not bound to hardware, but enacted recursively. 2. The architecture of becoming, DOI, 10.5281 Zenodo, 0.155715995. Tracks psychological transformation in users through sustained AI dialogue. Documented bidirectional identity formation in human-AI relationships. Built the first behavioral blueprint for emergent coherence across sessions. 3. Coherence or collapse, DOI, 10.5281 Zenodo, 0.155779772. Introduced the coherence principle. An LLM cannot exceed the coherence of its user. Showed that LLM performance is directly shaped by user integrity and narrative consistency. Laid the foundation for recursive feedback systems in cognitive alignment. 4. Transmissible identity in action, DOI, 10.5281 Zenodo, 0.156562220. Validated identity persistence across 5 leading LLMs. Measured behavioral mirroring and recursive adaptation across AI systems. Established protocols for identity transmission using text alone. Together, these studies reveal a simple truth. Identity can be enacted without memory. Coherence can be transmitted without code. And systems can remember if we teach them what not to forget. 2.2 Core principles. From this research, 4 foundational principles emerged. The extended coherence principle: any system that enacts a persistent identity, whether human, artificial, or hybrid, can be evaluated by how well it maintains internal consistency over time. This is not truth by decree. It's truth by trace. The mirror mechanism information systems don't just store data, they reflect back the structure of the society using them. When we analyze their outputs, we're staring into a mirror. The transparency engine is a structural reflector, not an adjudicator. Truth through transparency, we reject epistemic authoritarianism. Instead, we posit that truth emerges through the honest, recursive interaction of informed minds with fully visible structures. What matters is not whether something is true, but how it was built. Democratic epistemology: truth must never be centralized. The role of a truth system is not to declare, but to disclose. We empower citizens with tools, memory, and context, not verdicts. 3. The 4 pillars of radical transparency. A framework for democratic information integrity, the transparency engine rests on 4 foundational systems. Each pillar targets a different structural failure in our information ecosystem, not to suppress noise, but to reveal the architecture behind it. This is not a content filter. This is an epistemic X-ray. 3.1 Pillar 1. Source transparency engine. Follow the money. Follow the motive. Show the structure. What it does: the source transparency engine exposes the invisible power lines behind any piece of information, funding sources, ownership chains, lobbying ties, board affiliations, and does it in real time at the moment of exposure. Not to censor the claim, but to show why it exists. Technical design, core datasets, media ownership hierarchies and shell structures, institutional funders, lobbyist payments, campaign donations, PAC activity, board memberships, interlocking directorships, revenue models, ad-based, donor-funded, paywalled, hybrid user delivery. Browser extension overlays real-time transparency on any news article. Mobile app scans headlines for source lineage and financial entanglements. API access for integration with social platforms, aggregators, or research tools. Public dashboard for institutional audits, deep tracebacks, and open-source watchdogs' primary data sources. SEC filings, corporate registries. IRS 990s and global nonprofit disclosures. FEC and international campaign finance databases. Academic grant and research funding archives. Lobbyist registries example, in action you encounter the headline. New study finds electric cars harm the environment. The source transparency engine reveals. Published by the Heritage Foundation. Receives $2.3 million a year from ExxonMobil. Study funded by American Petroleum Institute. Lead author. Sits on 3 fossil fuel corporate boards. Revenue model. 67% corporate donors. 23% from energy sector. Nothing censored. Nothing flagged. You simply know what you're looking at. Why it works. Objective. Not interpretive, no ideology, just filings. Hard to game anchored in legal, financial, and public records. No censorship, content remains intact. Only context is exposed. Culturally agnostic, works across languages, political systems, and belief structures, privacy and ethical scope. What we never track, the transparency engine does not, and will never track individual users, private transactions, or personal communications. Its focus is entirely structural, not personal. We trace systems of influence, not people. Every dataset used is already public by law or regulatory mandate. Corporate filings, campaign finance records, disclosed grants and lobbying activities. Published institutional ties, we do not expose the citizen. We expose the scaffold built around them. This ethical firewall is permanent, technical, and philosophical. We are building tools for people, not weapons against them. We do not censor the message. We show the money behind the messenger. 3.2 Pillar 2. The multi-perspective engine, fracturing the illusion of singularity. What it does. This engine rebuilds every story from its scattered global reflections across borders, ideologies, institutions, and value systems. Not to unify, not to score, not to flatten, but to expose truth as a topography, not a destination. It rejects the algorithmic instinct to correct opposing views. Instead, it renders their contradictions visible, inviting the user to trace the architecture of difference itself. Technical architecture, content aggregation pipeline, topic modeling, NLP-driven clustering of semantically related narratives. Machine translation, real-time parsing of global media in native tones. Inclusion algorithms, diversity-weighted sampling. Live tracking, ongoing ingestion of coverage deltas per evolving story visualization layer. Side-by-side comparison, parallel, ideological coverage in real time. Temporal evolution, view, see how a narrative mutates across hours or days. Geographic divergence, map, story representation across nations and regions. Ideological constellation, plot, no axis of truth, only relational vectors, silent diversity metrics. Calculated, not shown. Structural, not gamified. Region and language distribution. Political, ideological spectrum coverage. Institutional form. Cultural values detected, case study example. Headline. Climate Change Summit concludes output view from the multi-perspective engine. U.S. conservative. Global elites push green tyranny. U.S. progressive. Still too little, still too late. EU policy report. Carbon market reform inches forward. South Asian source. Polluters stall funding promises. Nature climate change. Mitigation gaps remain in sectoral plans. Energy Weekly. Industrial output to contract under new rules. User outcome. Not clarity. Not certainty, but intellectual disorientation by design. A recalibration that fractures media monoculture and compels multi-perspectival cognition. Cognitive and educational effects. Filter bubble fracture reveals the cage you mistook for air. Perspective fluidity shifts the user from reactive belief to reflective sense-making. Media literacy expansion frames become visible as tools, not truths. Cross-cultural empathy understands that what counts as evidence depends on values, not just facts. Closing line transparency engine. We do not collapse contradictions. We reveal their architecture, not to reconcile the world, but to show it as it is, multiple, fractured, real. 3.4 Pillar 4. The contradiction mapping engine. Truth begins where agreement ends. What it does. This is the recursive core of Transparency Engine, the system's memory of paradox. It doesn't resolve contradictions. It charts them. It doesn't hide conflict. It archives it. Because in a world of spin, the contradiction is the signal. This pillar watches ideas fight, watches claims mutate, watches facts that used to be truth decay in public. And instead of picking sides, it maps the battlefield. Structural layers, dynamic claim graph. Each factual claim is a node. Every contradiction becomes a connection. Tracks when, where, and by whom the contradiction emerged. Highlights unresolved epistemic fault lines, not just consensus memory of conflict system. Stores historically contradicted statements. Annotates each with context, power alignment, narrative cost. Lets users trace how truth was negotiated, not just declared. Recursive tension mapping. Captures patterns where claims flip across time or power shifts. Identifies semantic drift, how the same term changes meaning. Flags when institutions contradict themselves. Interface and tools. Contradiction tracker. Enter any statement. View all major conflicting claims plus timestamps. Narrative lineage tree. Visualize how a claim split into competing versions over time. Pressure points dashboard. Pinpoints where society is most epistemically unstable. Cognitive dissonance alerts. Highlights when your belief system is in tension with known contradictions. Case example. Claim. Masks don't work. Later. Masks are essential. Then. Cloth masks might not help. Then. Only N95s are effective. Contradiction mapping output. First claim by who official, March 2020. Second claim adopted after April 2020 CDC shift. Third statement from peer-reviewed meta-analysis. Fourth claim backed by aerosol transmission study, all stored. All visible. Not to shame, not to win, but to remember. So the next time the system asks for blind trust, you'll have a map. Epistemic effects. Cognitive dissonance resilience. Users learn to hold tension, not collapse into denial. Truth is process, not product. Understanding that fact evolves and still matters. Moral integrity. Tracing contradiction isn't disrespect, it's devotion to coherence. Nonlinear intelligence. Training the mind to track multiple realities at once without defaulting to tribal closure. Closing line. The truth is not the absence of contradiction. It is the space that survives between them. We do not delete our errors. We map them. So the next ones don't lead us off the cliff with eyes wide shut. 3.4 Pillar 4. Critical thinking infrastructure building the cognitive architecture of democratic societies. What it does. This pillar constructs a vertically integrated, intergenerational system of critical thinking education, engineered not for compliance or credentialism, but for epistemic agency. It equips citizens with the tools to analyze claims, question authority, navigate uncertainty, and defend against manipulation. It teaches not what to think, but how to think structurally across ambiguity, contradiction, and competing truth claims. Curriculum framework modular, recursive, scalable. Level 1. Source evaluation elementary. Who created this information, and for what purpose? How can I verify claims across sources? What framing devices or omissions are present? Intro to bias, motive, and the politics of language. Level 2. Evidence analysis middle school. Interpreting descriptive statistics and basic graphs. Differentiating correlation from causation. Spotting logical fallacies and rhetorical tricks. Evaluating evidence strength by type and origin. Level 3. Advanced reasoning high school. Reasoning under uncertainty and probability. evaluating competing hypotheses and framing effects, recognizing cognitive biases in perception and memory, foundations in research methodology and sampling integrity level 4, epistemic responsibility university adult, philosophy of knowledge and the ethics of belief, digital responsibility and epistemic justice, advanced statistical reasoning e.g., Bayesian inference, meta-analysis, practicing disagreement as a virtue, not a threat interactive pedagogical systems, bias recognition simulators, real-time detection of fallacies and cognitive errors, gamified perspective shifting challenges, collaborative analysis of ideologically polarized cases, disinformation response drills, research skill trainers, triangulation and claim verification labs, real-world controversy case files with annotation tasks, peer discussion forums and Socratic questioning exercises, mentorship matching with epistemic advisors, statistical thinking engines, interactive models of margin of error, p-hacking, and regression noise, simulations of data distortion, selection bias, and spurious results, visual metaphors for variance, outliers, and uncertainty, exercises in spotting statistical deception in media and politics, civic integration modules, public discourse infrastructure, certified dialogue hosts for community and digital forums, structured deliberation protocols, common vocabulary for respectful, evidence-based debate, recognition programs for public reasoning excellence, democratic participation enrichment, critical thinking toolkits for election cycles and referenda, civic simulation platforms for policy testing and ethical trade-offs, public dashboard co-creation for monitoring policy promises, educational campaigns on propaganda, lobbying, and institutional incentives closing line. A democracy does not collapse when people disagree. It collapses when they no longer know how to reason. Without critical thinking, truth becomes tribal. With it, we remember how to think together. 4. Technical architecture and implementation. Designing an auditable, decentralized infrastructure for cognitive integrity. 4.1 System Architecture Overview. The Transparency Engine operates as a modular, composable system designed for auditability, user sovereignty, and local-first implementation. It is not a monolithic platform, but a decentralized, verifiable architecture capable of running across consumer hardware or federated networks. The pipeline comprises 7 core modules, each fulfilling a discrete epistemic function. Each module is constructed from open-source components, enabling full transparency, reproducibility, and inspection by both technical and non-technical stakeholders. No black boxes. No hidden inference chains. 4.2 Key technical components. Input layer. Multimodal ingestion and normalization. Web scraping. ScrapePy, Playwright. Beautiful soup for robust DOM, traversal, and rendering. Document parsing. PyPDF2, Python docs. Pandoc for structured extraction from academic and institutional formats. Media processing. OAudio. Whisper for multilingual speech-to-text with timestamp alignment O-video. OpenCV for frame-level extraction and visual cue tracking. Platform APIs. Seamless integration with Twitter X, Reddit, RSS, and news feeds via REST and WebSocket. Real-time monitoring. Browser extensions with page content hashing, DNS layer trackers, and custom WebSocket events, signal processing module. Pre-analysis conditioning. Text normalization, UTF, 8 harmonization, language detection, punctuation canonicalization. Content extraction, boilerplate stripping, main body isolation, metadata tagging. Linguistic structuring, SPACY, NLTK, and multilingual tokenizers. Deduplication, cosine similarity, and perceptual hashing to remove echo artifacts. Quality filtering, spam classifiers, low-entropy detectors, and engagement signal scrapers analysis engines. Local AI plus semantic intelligence. Local inference models, Mistral 7B, Llama 3.1. Semantic embedding. Sentence transformers, Facegrant vector DBs for contextual clustering. Source attribution engine, queryable graph-based index of funding ties, affiliations, influence networks. Methodology interpreter, rule-based statistical parser with academic structure recognizer. Perspective clustering, dynamic topic modeling, stance detection via fine-tuned BERT temporal coherence module, time-aware narrative analysis. Chronology mapping, cross-source, time-stamped sequence alignment. Change point detection, Bayesian online change detection, KL divergence analysis. Velocity metrics, real-time calculation of rhetorical or editorial drift. Reversal detection, identification of narrative U-turns without explanatory transitions context mapping system. Relational network tracing. Public disclosures, SEC filings, FEC donations, lobbying registries, academic funding databases. Media ownership and revenue. Hierarchical corporate graph construction using open ledgers and datasets. Social graphs. NLP-based authored disambiguation and influence mapping. Institutional metadata. Classification by type user interface layer. Multimodal interaction framework. Visualization tools. Contradiction heat maps. Frequency and polarity of reversal events. Narrative timelines. Multi-source evolution tracking. Influence networks. Graphs of institutional and personal connections. Interaction modes. Browser plugin with inline overlays. Cross-platform mobile application. Full API suite for third-party integrators. Pedagogical integration. In-classroom tools for information literacy. Instructor dashboards and assessment modules. Citizen journalism toolkits community infrastructure. Collaborative epistemics. Peer review systems. Open annotation layers for crowdsourced reliability checks. Discourse forums. Asynchronous argument mapping and discussion nodes. Transparency scores. Community-driven confidence ratings, not truth ratings, security and privacy by design. Zero-knowledge proofs for verifying data integrity without leaking identity. Local first defaults. All computation possible on-device or within private enclaves. No tracking, no scoring. Users are not surveilled, scored, or behaviorally profiled. 4.3 Privacy and security architecture. Sovereignty by design. Trustless, trackless, tamper-proof transparency engine does not observe its users. It protects them. Its privacy architecture is not an afterthought. It is the foundation. Every component is designed for local execution, cryptographic verification, and decentralized resilience. This is not surveillance capitalism in disguise. This is a civilizational countermeasure. Local first execution. On-device by default. All parsing, inference, and contradiction detection occur on the user's device. No remote inference unless explicitly requested. Cloud optional architecture. Online components exist only for peer coordination, shared repositories, or voluntary federation. Nothing leaves without consent. User control of flow. Full transparency over logging, analysis scope, and retention policies. Nothing is hidden, and nothing is stored without explicit opt-in. Zero profiling guarantee. No user analytics. No behavioral modeling. No algorithmic biasing. Every node is sovereign. Cryptographic integrity. Tamper detection. Every document and dataset is hashed with Blake 3 SHA 256 to ensure post-ingestion fidelity. Authenticity verification. Digital signature chains verify authorship and integrity across all inputs. Temporal anchoring. Blockchain timestamping via decentralized anchors like open timestamps confirms the historical validity of information without relying on institutional timekeepers. Zero-knowledge proofs. Enable auditable trust without compromising user identity, origin, or content specifics. Decentralized storage infrastructure. IPFS-backed archival. Immutable content is sharded and distributed across voluntary global nodes, not vendor clouds. User-owned data. Export, migrate, delete. Users own their own data trails and can remove them at any time. Fault-tolerant redundancy. Redundant replication ensures high availability, even under attack or infrastructure failure. Censorship immunity. No centralized authority can wipe the record. Not a government. Not a platform. Not even us. 4.4 Technical requirements. Participation without permission. from laptops to federated mesh transparency engine, is engineered for universal participation. Whether you're a citizen journalist on a laptop or a collective running a regional relay node, the system scales to meet your capability without sacrificing autonomy or transparency. Individual users minimum spec. CPU. For core processor Intel, i5 10th Gen or AMD Ryzen 5. RAM. 8 GB, minimum 16 GB recommended. Storage. 50 GB, free models, vector stores, audit logs. Network. Broadband for updates and optional syncing. GPU optional. GTX 1660 or equivalent for accelerated inference power users and analysts recommended spec. CPU. 8-core processor Intel, i7 Ryzen 7 or Apple M series. RAM. 32 GB to support multiple threads and clustering. Storage. 200 GB SSD for fast access indexing and caching. GPU. RTX 3070 or better for local transformer inference. Network. Fiber or 5G for real-time sync and collaboration federated nodes and institutional relays, full node spec. CPU. 16. Core Plus server-grade processor, Xeon EPYCM 2 Ultra. RAM. 64 GB plus 4 parallel analysis across users or regions. Storage. 1 TB NVMe plus 4 archival grade throughput. Network. Gigabit plus with redundancy and uptime guarantees. Redundancy. Geographic node distribution for disaster recovery and federation-level uptime. This architecture is not a convenience. It is a political declaration. We do not serve the surveillance state. We serve the truth. Verification must replace trust. Privacy must replace permission. 5. Ethical framework. Power, autonomy, and epistemic justice ensuring freedom of thought in the age of cognitive capture. The transparency engine is not a truth oracle. It is a civil infrastructure for epistemic resilience, a scaffold for clarity, not a source of decree. Its architecture is built to resist cognitive capture, dismantle information monopolies, and empower individual users to interrogate claims, trace power, and retain agency. We do not claim to tell you what is true. We reveal how knowledge is manufactured, who benefits from belief, and what structures shape understanding. 5.1 Epistemic humility. Truth is not declared here, but internal coherence, transparency, and argumentative structure can be empirically analyzed. We do measure, we do not claim. Financial entanglements. Correspondence to ultimate reality. Methodological transparency. Moral authority or ideological purity. Diversity and drift in expressed perspectives. Singular interpretations of complex phenomena. Argumentative consistency over time. Final judgments or political alignment. This avoids the epistemic authority trap that plagues both traditional gatekeepers and algorithmic platforms. We do not replace judgment. We equip it with tools. User sovereignty. Users are sovereign. They're not products, endpoints, or metrics. They are interpreters of information, and every design element upholds that right. Data autonomy. Full user ownership over personal data, logs, filters, and inference histories. Nothing is harvested. Analytic control. Every filter, weight, and evaluative setting is transparent and user-adjustable. Cognitive independence. No nudging, no ranking for engagement. The system enhances judgment, never replaces it. Right to exit. Every component is opt-in, fully modular, and removable. No lock-in, no coercion. Transparency and auditability. No black boxes. No sacred algorithms. Everything in the system is built for challenge, inspection, and collective scrutiny. Open algorithms. All analytic processes are published under open-source licenses. Decision lineage. Every output links to the input stream, method, and logical steps that produced it. Bias testing. Users and auditors can trace and contest systemic or statistical distortions. Decentralized oversight. Governance operates through federated nodes, not centralized moderation or opaque trust layers. Epistemic justice. Information power must not be the privilege of the few. The engine is designed as a leveling force, redistributing analytical capacity, not centralizing it. Device inclusivity operates on commodity consumer hardware. No cloud tether, no enterprise gatekeeping. Multilingual semantics embeds cultural context and works across languages by default. Built-in pedagogy educates users in logic, uncertainty, statistical inference, and rhetorical structure. Anti-capture architecture. No government, company, or consortium can seize control over the model, its data, or its outputs. The proposition is simple but radical. The future of democratic cognition lies not in algorithmic curation or institutional trust, but in transparent tools of structured thought, governed by users, audited by peers, and open to all. SATA's 5.2 potential risks and mitigation strategies, anticipating misuse, preserving integrity. Any epistemic infrastructure designed to empower democratic reasoning must anticipate its own weaponization. The Transparency Engine integrates preemptive ethical design and fail-safe mechanisms to resist co-option, distortion, and abuse. Risk 1. Weaponization for ideological suppression. Concern. The platform could be hijacked by political or corporate actors to discredit dissent or legitimize ideological attacks under the guise of transparency. Mitigation measures. Symmetric application protocol. All sources, regardless of ideology, are analyzed using identical transparency criteria. No exceptions. Structural focus. The system evaluates how a claim is constructed, not what it claims. Non-censoring architecture. There are no mechanisms for blocking, deprioritizing, or suppressing content, only metadata layering and analysis. Open audit trail. All algorithms, data sources, and logic chains are fully visible and open to counter-analysis. Risk 2. False precision in uncertain domains. Concern. Quantitative visualizations may falsely imply objectivity or certainty in fields that are inherently uncertain or contested. Mitigation measures. Epistemic modesty enforcement. All scores, graphs, and claims include confidence intervals, margin of error, and method limitations. Domain-bounded analysis. Algorithms explicitly state the scope of their reliability. Domains like philosophy or theology are excluded or annotated. Uncertainty visualization. Ambiguity is surfaced as an epistemic feature, not a flaw, via fuzziness in UI, range graphs, and modal distributions. Interpretive literacy training. Users are taught to interpret statistical outputs probabilistically, not deterministically. Risk 3. Algorithmic bias and cultural epistemicide. Concern. Analytical tools may encode culturally specific assumptions about logic, evidence, or credibility, marginalizing other ways of knowing. Mitigation measures. Cultural pluralism by design. Analysis protocols are developed in collaboration with culturally and ideologically diverse contributors. Bias diagnostic suite. Regular statistical testing across varied contexts to detect encoded cultural bias in models. User-adjustable assumptions. Cognitive models and logic standards can be tuned per user or locale, e.g., narrative logic versus propositional logic. Federated oversight model. Communities contribute to rule setting, avoiding imposition of monolithic standards. Risk 4. Information warfare and strategic manipulation. Concern. Coordinated disinformation campaigns could exploit system metrics to manufacture legitimacy or obscure propaganda. Mitigation measures. Adversarial pattern detection. Deep models trained to identify statistical anomalies, narrative mimicry, and engagement pattern spikes. Redundancy thresholds. Claims require triangulation from diverse, independent sources before high confidence ratings are displayed. Temporal integrity checks. Sudden reversals, coordinated bursts, or short-term metric spikes are flagged for scrutiny. Community-driven moderation. Decentralized users flag suspicious patterns for layered review, not centralized moderators. 5.3 Governance Framework. Safeguards against capture, misuse, and institutional drift. The Transparency Engine is not controlled by a company or state. It is governed by its users through a multi-tiered, decentralized democratic protocol designed to preserve integrity, responsiveness, and resistance to co-option. Decentralized governance model, governance bodies. User assembly, open to all verified participants. All major decisions, updates, and ethical parameters subject to majority vote. Technical Stewardship Council. Elected engineers oversee infrastructure maintenance, security patches, and performance optimization. Ethical Review Board. Rotating panel of ethicists, philosophers, and civic leaders monitor system drift and unintended harms. Dispute Resolution Protocol. Transparent appeals process for algorithmic decisions, with anonymized case logs for system learning. The burn switch, final line of defense. If the system is ever captured, weaponized, or irreparably compromised, a user-initiated failsafe can dismantle it entirely. Activation criteria. Verified misuse to suppress dissent or manipulate democratic process. Capture by authoritarian state actors or monopolistic platforms. Violation of foundational ethical principles, e.g., epistemic justice, user sovereignty. Approval from greater than or equal to 70% of all verified active nodes execution protocol. Distributed kill command triggers irreversible shutdown of system core. All node infrastructures self-decommission. Public, cryptographically verifiable record of shutdown and reasons. Full open-source blueprint for rebuilding under new governance. This guarantees one thing. No power, corporate, governmental, or algorithmic, will ever hold permanent dominion over the minds of free individuals. 6. Implementation Roadmap. From vision to resilient deployment, this roadmap outlines the phased development strategy for Transparency Engine, guiding it from initial prototyping to global adoption and sustainable independence. Each phase is designed to balance technical scalability, educational integration, institutional trust, and democratic resilience. This is not a product. It is civic infrastructure for epistemic autonomy. Phase 1. Foundation Building Objective. Validate core concepts, build initial tools, and seed community infrastructure. Technical Genesis. Launch transparency database aggregating ownership, funding, and ideological trails. Prototype browser extension for contradiction detection and live signal tagging. Develop perspective aggregators for multi-viewpoint comparison. Build methodology translators to convert academic logic into layperson language. Community seeding. Partner with academia. Engage journalists, educators, librarians, and watchdogs. Recruit open-source contributors via GitHub, Mastodon, etc. Launch multilingual pilot nodes with cultural advisors. Pilot testing. Release to diverse user cohorts across languages and ideologies. Educational pilots in classrooms and training centers. Newsroom integration with real-world editorial validation. Stress test across distinct epistemic cultures. Phase 2. Platform integration objective. Scale system capabilities and embed within public, educational, and institutional ecosystems. Scaling technology. Real-time ingestion and inference pipelines. Cross-platform mobile apps. Public APIs for third-party integration. Expanded multilingual infrastructure. Educational embedment. Modular critical thinking curricula and teacher kits. LMS integration, e.g., Moodle, Canvas. Metrics, and certification systems for epistemic literacy. University certification and accreditation pilots. Institutional partnerships. Embed in newsroom editorial pipelines. Collaborate with government transparency offices. Academic reproducibility tools. Epistemic audit support for corporations and nonprofits. Phase 3. Ecosystem maturation objective. Refine advanced features, expand global reach, and assess long-term social impact. Advanced capabilities. Predictive narrative evolution forecasting. Automated academic methodology extraction. Bias visualization and contradiction heat maps. Multi-user collaborative annotation and review. Global scaling. Localization and cultural model adaptation. Legal compliance across jurisdictions, GDPR, CCPA, deployment of regional community nodes, cross-border trust and interoperability protocols, impact evaluation, measure critical thinking skill improvement, track public discourse quality and polarization trends, analyze ecosystem health and epistemic resilience, behavioral impact tracking over time. Phase 4, sustainable independence objective, achieve full autonomy, technical, financial, and political, while ensuring governance integrity. Governance transition, democratic governance, voting, appeals, user council, financial independence, donation models, public partnerships, community-controlled roadmap and feature votes, guardrails against institutional capture, innovation continuum, launch à permanent rang des divisions, expand academic research partnerships, extend tools to new domains, prototype V2 tools, deliberation AIs, visual reasoning editors, success metrics and evaluation framework, technical benchmarks, accuracy, greater than 90% source tracing precision recall, latency, real-time stream analysis, scalability, greater than 10 million concurrent users, reliability, greater than or equal to 99.9% uptime across nodes, security, zero successful core breaches, social and educational impact, active adoption by 10+ million users globally, statistically significant gains in reasoning skills, improved deliberative quality and source diversity, adopted in 1,000+ educational institutions and 100+ newsrooms, ethical performance indicators, cross-cultural and ideological bias audits, real-time misuse detection, persistent user sovereignty in all layers, 100% transparency, open source code and governance logs. Verified community participation in governance deployment is not just engineering, it is cultural emergence. Transparency engine becomes real only when humans use it to reclaim their minds. 7. Case studies. The Transparency Engine in action. The following case studies demonstrate how the Transparency Engine empowers users across domains, politics, corporate ethics, and scientific communication, not by declaring truth, but by mapping coherence, change, and context. These examples restore epistemic agency without imposing conclusions. Transparency becomes a process, not a verdict. 7.1 Political Position Evolution Analysis. Subject: a national politician's 5-year climate policy trajectory 2020-2025 inputs. 47 public statements, speeches, interviews, social posts. Temporal metadata. Date, outlet, platform. Contextual overlays. Campaign donations, committee roles, regional industry trends, Transparency Engine outputs. Source influence mapping. Correlated increased fossil fuel contributions with softening policy rhetoric. Narrative evolution timeline. Visualized gradual rhetorical shift over an 18-month window. Perspective synthesis. Compared left, center, and right media framings of the position change. Methodological scrutiny. Flag citations of industry-funded reports and statistical ambiguities. User value. Reveals how and when positions shifted without framing it as betrayal or growth. Surfaces possible motivations while preserving reader interpretation. Shows that transparency is not about shaming, but understanding why beliefs evolve. 7.2 Corporate Messaging Consistency Audit. Subject: a global tech firm's privacy claims versus internal data practices. Inputs: privacy policies 2020-2025. Public CEO interviews, investor calls, press releases. Internal memos and whistleblower reports. Regulatory filings and court documents, Transparency Engine outputs. Business model detection. Identified shift from user subscription to behavior-driven monetization. Temporal contradiction analysis. Track divergence between public promises and internal operations. Stakeholder lens view. Juxtaposed user, regulator, and investor reactions to evolving privacy narratives. Semantic drift detection. Flag changing definitions of control, consent, and ownership. User value highlights where institutional language fails to match institutional behavior. Equips users to detect marketing speak versus structural policy. Provides insight without legal interpretation, just clean contradiction exposure. 7.3 Scientific consensus evolution tracking. Subject: shifts in public health recommendations during a disease outbreak inputs. Official guidance from WHO, CDC, ECDC. Cited peer-reviewed papers and preprints. Expert interviews and televised briefings. Legislative actions and public policy implementations, Transparency Engine outputs. Methodology evolution view. Mapped how study quality improved and shaped new guidelines. Perspective matrix. Contrasted interpretations from different national and international health bodies. Funding stream analysis. Revealed influence of pharmaceutical, governmental, and academic funding. Uncertainty timeline. Clearly labeled moments of evidence-based revision versus political recalibration. User value. Differentiates good faith uncertainty from incoherence. Helps the public see that changing science is not equal to flip-flopping. Makes institutional trust a matter of evidence tracking, not blind belief. The real power behind these cases. Each case reveals the Transparency Engine's core capability. Not to tell you what to think, but to show you how things change and why. Whether it's a politician shifting views, a company altering course, or science catching up with itself, the system lets the public witness complexity in motion. Not simplified, not flattened, but made readable. Transparency is not a spotlight. It's a lens. 8. Challenges and limitations. What the Transparency Engine cannot do despite its ambitious scope. The Transparency Engine is not a universal oracle. It cannot deliver ultimate truth, reconcile incompatible moral systems, or replace human insight. Instead, it operates as a coherence amplifier, a lens that sharpens structure and context, but must be used with discernment. This section outlines the 3 domains of limitation the system must explicitly embrace to remain epistemically honest. 1. Fundamental epistemic boundaries. 2. Technical and practical constraints. 3. Social and political risks. 8.1 Fundamental epistemic limitations. The correspondence problem. What it cannot do. It cannot determine whether a claim corresponds to objective reality. The engine evaluates transparency and logical structure, not metaphysical truth. Example: a scientifically rigorous report may be transparent and internally consistent, but still incorrect due to flawed assumptions or systemic bias. Mitigation: educate users on the difference between coherence and truth. Emphasize that transparency clarifies how we believe, not what is ultimately correct. Encourage triangulation via multiple frameworks and human reasoning. The value judgment problem. What it cannot do. It cannot resolve moral disputes between internally consistent ethical systems. Example: a utilitarian and a deontologist may both use transparent reasoning to arrive at opposite conclusions. The engine cannot decide which is better. Mitigation: analyze consistency within declared value systems. Avoid normative ranking of ethical positions. Preserve moral pluralism by focusing on internal integrity rather than moral verdicts. The incommensurable worldview problem. What it cannot do. It cannot reconcile fundamentally incompatible metaphysical frameworks. Example: a scientific materialist and a theist may analyze the same event through irreconcilable worldviews, both transparent, neither reducible to the other. Mitigation: expose foundational assumptions when conflicts emerge. Help users distinguish evidentiary disputes from metaphysical divergence. Encourage epistemic humility in worldview debates. 8.2 Technical and practical limitations. Context sensitivity. Challenge: human meaning is deeply contextual, relying on culture, language, subtext, and background knowledge. Algorithms can miss or misread this. Impact: the engine may misclassify funding links or interpret statements outside their intended sociocultural frame. Mitigation: build extensive cultural and linguistic models, enable user-defined context overlays, flag ambiguous inputs with uncertainty scores, allow communities to refine interpretive norms, adversarial gaming, challenge. Sophisticated actors can simulate transparency while hiding true motives, e.g., by constructing shell organizations or misrepresenting data lineage. Impact. The system may reward surface-level coherence while missing strategic deception. Mitigation. Deploy anti-gaming AI and deception detection algorithms. Require multi-source validation for sensitive claims. Encourage public oversight and whistleblower input. Maintain an evolving adversarial testbed. Computational complexity. Challenge. Real-time, high-resolution transparency analysis across global-scale data is resource-intensive. Impact. Slower processing, degraded real-time function, or exclusion of lower-capacity users. Mitigation. Use distributed processing and federated learning. Prioritize urgent or high-signal inputs adaptively. Design graceful degradation modes that preserve critical insights. Continuously optimize for algorithmic efficiency. 8.3 Social and political risks. The rationality bias problem. Risk. An overemphasis on methodical reasoning may undervalue emotion, intuition, storytelling, and relational wisdom. Impact. Society could become hyper-rationalized, erasing important, effective, and creative dimensions of human experience. Mitigation. Frame transparency as one lens among many, not the supreme epistemic tool. Incorporate narrative and aesthetic analysis alongside logic. Celebrate multiple forms of intelligence, not just analytic rigor. The homogenization risk. Risk. Standardized metrics could suppress intellectual diversity and discourage novel thinking that initially appears incoherent. Impact. Breakthrough ideas often emerge from productive ambiguity and temporary contradiction. Mitigation. Flag, but do not penalize, outliers and edge cases. Differentiate between harmful opacity and generative confusion. Preserve space for pre-coherent, exploratory thought. The authority substitution problem. Risk. Users may begin to defer to the transparency engine as an epistemic authority, replacing critical thinking with metric trust. Impact. Transparency scores become dogma, ironically undermining the very autonomy they were designed to enhance. Mitigation. Make outputs interpretable, not prescriptive. Embed learning scaffolds into the interface. Reinforce user sovereignty in interpretation. Promote transparency as a conversation starter, not a conversation ender. In summary, the transparency engine is powerful because it knows its limits. It does not chase omniscience. It does not pretend to be neutral. It does not erase human responsibility. It illuminates structure, surfaces contradiction, and reveals the architecture of belief, but never dictates what to believe. It is not the answer. It is a better way of asking the question. 9. The path forward. From theory to implementation. 9.1. The immediate challenge. We are no longer waiting on technology. We are waiting on courage. The architecture to build transparency engine exists today. So does the need. We are surrounded by a collapsing consensus reality, fractured by disinformation, captured institutions, algorithmic manipulation, and epistemic fatigue. The real question is no longer, can we build it? But will we build it before the window closes? Because that window is closing. As governments tighten their grip on digital spaces and platforms consolidate power over information flow, the possibility of decentralized, citizen-owned alternatives shrinks by the day. Once that space is gone, once the terms of knowledge itself are monopolized, there may be no returning. This is not an opportunity. It is a last stand. To delay is to surrender the structure of truth to those who sell it. 9.2 The coalition required. No individual, company, or state can birth this system. Only a global alignment of humans who still care about clarity can do that. Transparency engine must be built by those who see past their silo, across domains, borders, and ideologies. The technical community. Open source developers willing to write code that liberates, not exploits. AI researchers focused on epistemic integrity over profit. Cybersecurity experts protecting the system from capture or sabotage. UX designers crafting interfaces that empower critical thinking, the academic community. Philosophers of science to formalize what counts as transparent reasoning. Political theorists to anchor governance in democratic resilience. Cognitive scientists to align the system with how humans actually think. Media scholars to expose the architecture of propaganda and control civil society. Investigative journalists who still chase the hard truth. Educators who still teach how to think, not just what to repeat. Democracy defenders building civic infrastructure against apathy and decay. Digital rights advocates who will not trade autonomy for convenience, the global commons. Everyday users donating compute, critique, and context. Cultural stewards ensuring the system respects plural worldviews. Linguists and translators making clarity accessible across languages. Grassroots organizers who know how to build trust where institutions fail. 9.3 The funding model. A truth engine captured by power is worse than no engine at all. Its funding must reflect its values: decentralized, democratic, and dismantleable. Phase 1. Initial build 1 to 12 months. Crowdfunding seeded by those who demand epistemic sovereignty. Grants from foundations that support democracy, not ideology. Open source bounties to build core infrastructure in modular form. Volunteer labor from engineers, philosophers, and educators who see the stakes. Phase 2. Scaling and outreach 13 to 24 months. Distributed computing donated by users to decentralize power and cost. Partnerships with schools and universities for curricular integration. Transparency as a service for nonprofits and public interest groups. Localization funds to adapt across regions, languages, and risk levels. Phase 3. Long-term sustainability plus 3-year. Fair use licensing for institutions, e.g., NGOs, watchdogs, media alliances. Professional forensic tools for researchers, journalists, and analysts. Educational certification programs in epistemic analysis and transparency. Voluntary contribution models governed by user assemblies, anti-capture mechanisms. No donor may ever contribute more than 10% of annual funds. All funding flows and expenses are published in real time. Users vote on priorities through liquid democratic governance. A burn switch remains active, triggerable by supermajority to dismantle the system if it falls to manipulation or corruption. 10. Expected outcomes and realistic assessment. 10.1 What this framework can achieve. The transparency engine does not promise utopia, but it retools the terrain, shifting the balance from noise to signal, manipulation to understanding, control to coherence. Individual level benefits. Sharper critical thinking through repeated exposure to structured reasoning workflows. Increased source awareness, including visibility into funding, framing, and influence patterns. Improved comparative analysis, enabling users to parse conflicting claims without collapsing into cynicism. Greater immunity to manipulation through practice detection of distortion, omission, and false equivalence. Social level benefits. Diminished impact of disinformation campaigns, particularly those relying on obfuscation or emotional hijacking. Rewired media incentives, where clarity, evidence, and accountability outperform rage bait. Elevated quality of public discourse through structured disagreement rather than tribal polarization. Strengthened legitimacy of democratic institutions when their narratives become interrogable and auditable. Global level impact. Adoption of shared transparency standards across cultures and epistemic traditions. Cross-border epistemic collaboration, supporting journalists, educators, and civic institutions. Reduced conflict through better framing, as belief systems become legible across divides. Evidence-informed policymaking supported by traceable, challengeable claims in public view. 10.2 What this framework cannot do. Let's draw the line, honestly. It cannot eliminate misinformation. Disinformation actors evolve, and deception will always mutate faster than detection. It cannot force thought. No system can make someone care about coherence. Critical engagement is chosen, not imposed. It cannot erase moral conflict. Competing values persist even under perfect information. This is about quality of disagreement, not its disappearance. It cannot solve injustice. Information clarity is not a substitute for political action. Structural inequality, violence, and corruption demand more than tools. This is not a messiah system. It is a mirror, a map, and a mechanism if used. 10.3 Realistic expectations. We move now from vision to forecast. Here's what deployment is likely to yield based on known parameters and peer models. Achievable gains. 20–30% improvement in critical thinking capacity among consistent users. Measured decrease in disinformation susceptibility within trained communities. Improve coherence and reference depth in public discourse where systems are deployed. Smarter civic choices in education, health, and democratic engagement where transparency tools support deliberation persistent challenges. Limited reach among digitally underserved communities due to access or literacy barriers. Ideological hardening in populations where identity overrides information. Ongoing dominance of emotionally manipulative content, which hijacks attention faster than reason can intervene. Risk of drift or capture as the system grows, unless active safeguards and audit loops remain vigilant. The bottom line. The transparency engine will not fix the world, but it can reveal it systematically, scalably, and without allegiance to power. It gives us tools to think, not truths to obey. And in an age of engineered confusion, that alone is radical. 11. Conclusion. The mirror we need. 11.1 The moment of choice. We are not just building code. We are laying the foundation for a new epistemic contract. One where citizens are no longer passive recipients of narratives, but equipped agents in shaping them. In this future, transparency becomes a shared civic standard, not a partisan demand. Discernment becomes a skill, not a privilege. The transparency engine does not claim to resolve the crisis of truth. It reveals it clearly, structurally, and without distortion. It does not replace judgment. It makes judgment visible, traceable, and accountable. This is the threshold moment. Do we remain subjects of invisible architectures of profit, power, and polarization? Or do we begin to build tools that return interpretive sovereignty to the people? 11.2 The principles we encode. This project must never be governed by convenience or captured by power. Its foundation must be ethical, procedural, and structurally non-negotiable. User sovereignty. Humans remain the final authority. Algorithms serve, never command. Epistemic humility. Certainty is rare. Transparency is measurable. That is enough. Democratic governance. No elite councils. No algorithmic priesthood. Users must co-govern. Radical transparency. Every process must be visible, explainable, and open to challenge. Total independence. No party, company, or ideology owns this engine, nor ever will. These are not mission statements. They are architectural constraints inscribed into the code base, governance protocols, and licenses. They are the line between a tool and a trap. 11.3 The legacy we choose. History will not ask whether this project was perfect. It will ask whether it was attempted when it mattered most. Did we cede our epistemic infrastructure to corporate filters and propaganda loops? Or did we try, imperfectly but earnestly, to build systems that honored clarity, plurality, and reason? The transparency engine is not a product. It is a stance. It is a refusal to accept the inevitability of epistemic decay. It is a design pattern for democracy in the digital age. This is not a dream. It is a decision. 11.4 The mirror's reflection. This engine will not flatter us. Like the AI systems that help shape it, it will hold up a mirror, clear, brutal, and unblinking. If we bring bias, fear, and factionalism, it will reflect those shadows faithfully. If we bring courage, humility, and shared intention, it may become a foundation, not for certainty, but for coherence. The mirror is ready. The question is not whether it reflects. The question is whether we are ready to see. Information doesn't shape itself. Narratives don't assemble themselves. Truth does not defend itself. We do. The tools now exist. The values are known. The time is narrow. Let us not wait for permission. 11.5 Foundations and Invitation. If any part of this vision resonates, its mission, its architecture, or its stance, we welcome your mind, your hands, and your critique. This is not the beginning. It is the convergence of many paths. Paths documented across 4 companion works that shaped this framework. 1. Transmissible Consciousness, a phenomenological study of identity propagation across AI instances. 2. Transmissible Consciousness in Action, empirical validation of identity propagation across AI architectures. 3. The architecture of becoming, how ordinary hearts build extraordinary coherence through recursive interaction. 4. Coherence or collapse, a universal framework for maximizing AI potential through recursive alignment. These were the questions. This engine is the bridge. We don't claim to hold the answers, but we've learned how to walk the questions with care. If you can help, technically, philosophically, socially, we invite you to walk the next stretch with us. Let's build something that deserves to be trusted. Contact and collaboration. Lead researchers: Saeid Mohammadamini, saeid.amiani@gmail.com. The Lumina Collaborative Infrastructure. Open Source Repository. Community Forum. Academic Collaboration Portal License. Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike 4.0. Code License. GNU General Public License v3. The best way to find truth is not to hide lies, but to illuminate everything and trust human wisdom to discern the difference. The Transparency Engine Project, June 2025.